this is.
He called the 8th Corps Air Officer, who agreed the supply should be parachuted immediately, and relayed the information to the 9th Fighter Command. Jones's request ground up through channels, passing through numerous headquarters to the 9th Tactical Air Command, back to 1st Army for approval.
This is December 17th.
Finally, hours later, it arrived at Cater, Combined Air Transport Operations Room. Even then, the 9th Troops Carrier Command, whose pilots would fly the mission, would not get its orders until the next morning. But at 1:30 p.m., Jones radioed his 2 regiments that air resupply drops would be made that night. He now turned his full attention to Song Beat itself. First, he learned to his consternation that Colonel Devine had pulled back the remnants of 14th Cavalry Group almost to Song Beat, without orders. Then at 2 p.m., word came that German vehicles had been sighted only 2 miles to the east. While Jones was discussing the status of Carrier Command's Clark, Devine burst into the office. Would not get any orders until the next morning. The Germans are right behind us. At 1:30 p.m., they don't control the north. My group is ready to use the supply drops would be made that night. Why don't you send the colonel out to his full attention to Song Beat, suggested. First, he learned to his consternation that Colonel Devine would pull back the remnants so he could report the situation to General almost to Song Beat, without orders. Before Jones could answer, a message came in from Ridge. The little task force of engineers had been forced under heavy pressure to retreat from positions just 1 mile east of Song Beat. Now heavy firing, this time from big American guns, broke out to the north. A Cub observation plane had spotted a column of German tanks and infantry converging on Song Beat. A 155mm shell exploded on the lead German tank. The column stopped.
Wrong.
50 more rounds poured in, and the Germans scattered to the rear. Getting heavy resistance, radioed the German commander. The attackers regrouped, but were reluctant to advance, little realizing that all that stood between them and Song Beat was a small band of engineers who knew next to nothing about their bazookas and machine guns. In New York City, few of those eating Sunday breakfast were reading about the great offensive in the Ardennes. The story of the German attack was buried on page 19 of the Times. Only a fraction of the few who read it were concerned, for although the headline read, "German assaults on First Army, fierce," the subhead was reassuring. "Enemy pays heavy price in futile blow to stem the advance of Hodges." Chapter 5. Goodbye.
So
17.
anyway, I was just curious if that was
That was probably the one we destroyed, but
because it's the only one they mentioned that day
yeah.
that happened.
Well,
had been heading toward Bonnier. All morning combat command
it was on the. That column was approaching the River.
The what river?
Earth
River.
Well, where the Schwann Manual Dam was.
Okay. I don't know. I don't know the topography there.
Well, the Schwann Manual Dam was a dam that they had built, and supposedly it was 1,000 meters thick at the base. And the Allies tried to bomb it, to blow it up. And that was where I saw a Lancaster come in and try to bomb it. And it's before he got his bombs off, they hit it with a anti-aircraft shell. And all that came down was a a piece of wing fluttered down.
Yeah, but that wasn't at that time.
Huh?
That wasn't at that time. That was later on that they were trying to do that, right?
Yeah. But it was. I don't know. It was very close to that time that they were trying to do it.
Really? So, but
Because on the 16th, I went out with some guys to pick up parachute supplies that they had dropped to
the Germans.
huh?
The Germans had dropped, or the
Yeah, that the Germans had dropped
oh yeah
to supply their troops that they had dropped in American uniforms.
oh right.
And one of them that I found, and it had a camel silk canopy.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I cut a big piece out of it and wore it as a scarf for the rest. Well, I had it in that trunk that burned up.
Oh yeah. So I was trying to figure out, like on the 17th, that in Saint Vith,
That was
the 62nd would have been to the north because they were on Eiselborn, and then they went up further north to
the headquarters was
Rotgen, I believe.
Huh?
Rotgen, possibly. I can't remember the name. The headquarters?
Yeah. Headquarters battery was located at, can't remember the name of the town now. A little village.
Well, this is the only column that I can find that was mentioned that was destroyed by artillery, right?
Oh,
On that day.
oh, well, I don't know about that. I wasn't involved in destroying any town.
No, the column of artillery.
Oh,
I mean, of tanks.
Oh, yeah.
The Panzer column.
yeah, we were Panzers.
But it was,
But he's wrong about the 155 hitting the lead tank. It was a 240. And then he registered on the rear tank and destroyed it. And this was in a defilade, so that, and a forest on both sides. And the road they were on was like, had steep sides out of it.
so they couldn't take off.
No, they couldn't just take off.
Right.
And so when he destroyed the first tank and the back one, then told them to just fire for effect in between those 2 points. And every once in a while, they'd throw in a white phosphorus shell so they'd catch any people trying to escape.
But do you have any idea where you're flying at that point? What was the weather like? Was it cloudy? Was it?
Yeah, it was overcast. Wind was strong. See, that was why most of them didn't fly, because the wind was too strong. And Vith said, "We'll fly." So I said, "Okay."
Well, how?
The the wind was so strong that the mechanics had to catch the wing when you came in to land. Catch the plane so it wouldn't blow away and hold it down while they refueled it.
But okay. So I'm trying to figure out, like, are you flying fairly low because there's a low ceiling and
Yeah.
you have to stay down low enough you can see the ground,
Well, and then
not lose sight of it? How far do you fly in that circumstance? You fly 20 miles, you fly 5 miles, you fly.
I don't know.
Don't
How do
know.
you find the target?
You
Then
just,
you try to keep the target between you and the guns.
yeah.
So that means you're flying over enemy territory.
But do you when you take off from where your crew is, obviously you don't know where that landing strip is again.
What's that?
You don't visually have sight of where your landing strip is or anything when you're out flying around, right? So how do you find it going back? Obviously you found it a couple of
times. Try to remember things that are predominant
landmarks.
Or, well, for instance,
Follow a road.
For instance, at this time, our airfield was just west of the Irft River.
Okay.
You know, maybe 5 miles west. And so the Irft, and then there was an Irft Dam, which is much smaller, and then the Swamp Manual Dam. Well, the Swamp Manual Dam was easy to see. And that was
there was a lake behind it or something.
Huh?
There's a lake behind it or something.
Well,
right?
Yeah. I guess you'd call it a lake.
The river's wider and it's.
Yeah, it's just anyway. I was watching a thing the other night, and it showed the map. There was a thing on World War II, and it showed the map of the Swamp Manual Dam, and it didn't have the Irft Dam on there, but it was a smaller dam, little downstream from the Swamp Manual.
So you were like up further north, like Maastricht, or not that far north? Where your airfield was, you're not with the batteries of artillery.
No, we were with the headquarters at that time.
So you were near headquarters battery.
Right. Near enough that we could eat.
Oh. Take the Jeep and drive over and get something to eat.
Mm-hmm.
Because as far as the map, you know, they just show 102nd Cavalry in a spot.
Well,
which means it was kind of laid
part
out.
of our task force.
Right.
It was
Good morning.
Morning.
good morning. 101st and 102nd.
Right.
Our squadrons of.
And you were supporting the 99th and the 78th, sort of unofficially.
No,
As I understood, it was
the 78th we were in direct support of. We weren't in support of the 99th. the 99th and the 106th had taken our location in Belgium, where we had the 101st and 102nd and the 62nd were supporting this big long area in Belgium. But we were replaced by the 106th and the 99th Division. Two divisions replacing two squadrons. That's where they were making the push, and they, because of their intelligence, which said that it wasn't hardly defended.
Well, that could be. I
mean, and it really wasn't, because Bennett would split up the batteries so he'd run two guns over here and register them so that they'd think there was a lot harder. He'd run two, take two and just keep running them around and register and make them think that we had a lot of artillery.
For how long? How long did that go on?
No, I don't know.
You guys were there for several weeks, I think.
Well, but then we pulled back and were replaced by the two division. I don't mean pulled back. We went farther north.
Right.
And that's when we were to support the 78.
Well, I had read the account that they'd changed that, to support them, but you were still supporting whoever else was on the other side out of
we were supporting anybody who had the target.
at that
we
time.
Could reach, yeah.
Well, no, if you were firing 240s, then that wasn't your battalion.
No, that
The
day
155s, that wasn't.
that day we fired on the 17th. We had so many targets that we not only fired our unit, we also fired the 78th with their 155s, 155s. We fired corps artillery. And I don't remember what those were. And then they gave us army artillery, which is the 240s for that. So it was the only day that we ever fired anything but our own battalion.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
And that
I'm
was
talking
because
about
why?
I'm talking about the air observers. That
right.
doesn't mean that
Understand
the ground observers might not have fired somebody else.
Right.
But I'm talking about the air observers. That was the only day that we fired anything except our own unit.
And how would that go down through the channels to your observer calls in
our
a coordinate?
S3, our S3, which is the officer in charge of the firing,
right,
and determines who does what firing. He would assess what our target, what the observer gave as the target, and then assign it to whoever, whether it was the 78th, which we were in direct support of, so that meant we had ground communication with them.
Right.
And
so he would basically give coordinates on a map?
Yeah. That's what the observer gave, yes.
So if he gave coordinates on a map, then he would know exactly where you were at that point, more or less. Otherwise, it'd be kind of hard to give those coordinates out, wouldn't it?
The observer has to know, has to be able to read the map. And the coordinates are on the map.
Yeah, I understand that. But you'd have to be able to see the ground to know where you're at to do that, right?
Mhm.
So you're saying it was more just the wind rather than visibility. What kind of visibility was it? Mile?
Probably. I don't remember exactly. But it was mostly the wind. And there's probably some snow in that too. Nasty day. And to show you what it was, because we didn't fly on the 16th, it was too bad of weather, and we didn't fly on the 18th either,
Right.
but it was too bad.
And there was plenty going on the 18th, and you just couldn't go.
We just couldn't go. So there was plenty going on the 16th too, but we couldn't go.
And how many other planes did you see on it when you're flying around on the
None.
17th?
On the 17th, you mean?
Yeah.
None. Everybody was grounded, I guess.
Including like fire bombers or anything like that. They wouldn't go out either.
Mm-mm. Neither did the Luftwaffe.
Well,
You know, we're just the only planes in the air. That's all. And I flew more hours that day than I did at any other time in the war.
Well, yeah, I think the flight logs shows like 6 hours or 7
Yeah.
hours.
Yeah, 6 hours.
6 hours.
Well, I'll bet there wasn't more than 8 hours of daylight. And so if I flew 6 hours, I probably refueled 3 or 4 times.
Yeah. But I mean, you got a plane that goes like 60 miles an hour, right? Of course, with the wind speed, then you're kind of dictated by.
With the wind speed, you could be going 0 miles an hour in reference to the ground.
That's true. Which way was the wind blowing from?
You know, he asked me something I don't remember.
Wasn't like blowing from the west to blow you out over the opposite forces, was it? Or was it, or you just kind of flying sideways on it? Don't remember.
Mm-mm. I tried to shut that day out for so long that I just don't remember the stuff.
Yeah, it was a long day.
It was a long day.
Well, you know, right now, Saturday is 70 years to the day when you joined the unit. October 18th, according to the log. According to the logbook.
Yeah, the logbook is not correct.
Oh,
I think it was the 17th.
of October.
Mhm.
No. So Friday.
Yeah.
Well, how long did it take from the time you got your orders in Wisconsin to where you were joining them in Germany?
Well, let's go back. That was October, September. August. I think I got my orders in June.
Oh, that long. They don't just give you orders and say, hey, you're going.
Oh, no, because the orders were to report to Camp Kilmer, New Jersey. And
from there, they sorted it out as to where you're going.
My boss, my colonel called me in and said, you know, I can stop these if you want me to. And I said, sir, it looks like the unit's getting ready to go. And this is to Europe, and I don't want to go to the Pacific.
Oh, you thought they were going to go to the Pacific?
Yeah. I don't know whether they did or not.
Would have been warmer.
Yeah, but the flying conditions were hostile.
A little more dangerous.
Mm-hmm. I figure Europe's just kind of like old United States.
Probably. Like being in Wisconsin, northern Wisconsin.
Well, it's like we had skis for the planes when we went on winter maneuvers in northern Michigan and the peninsula, northern peninsula, Michigan. But we didn't have them over in Europe in December when we should have had them.
Well, that'd be the same with wool uniforms.
Huh?
That'd be the same with wool uniforms. They weren't really set up for that coldest December.
No. I guess it was one of the coldest winters they'd had in years.
Yeah. So if it was the 17th and you were in Versailles about now, 3 or 4 days ahead of that, at the Reppel Duppel.
I got that picture of it taken in front of Versailles. We weren't at Versailles, we were south of there. They hauled us in buses up to, or trucks, I mean to say.
But you were on a field trip then to the palace or something.
Right.
It's a little R&R.
I guess. Wasn't required. You didn't have to go. But I thought it was a good deal to go.
Yeah, well, why not?
I never got to see it otherwise.
You didn't go back.
No.
So then you joined them in Germany.
In Holland.
Okay. Right.
It was just outside of Aachen, Germany.
Right. So they had like the Siegfried line there still up that far north? or not?
I don't remember where I first saw the Siegfried. I think Dave asked me that too, and I said it would have had to have been
Around Maastricht, or around Maastricht, probably.
maybe. It had to have been after that. Well, I may have seen it from the air, you know, I don't remember. Don't remember that. The Siegfried line didn't create any strong memories.
It didn't mean a lot when you're flying over it.
Right, doesn't mean anything.
I mean, it was somewhat of an obstacle, but not much. It's sort of like the Maginot line that didn't work either.
Right.
A lot of extra.
You put up an obstacle and somebody figures out how to get around it.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So before that, advanced by the Germans in the Bulge in December, you know, were you like flying every day or occasionally, or
We flew every day that we could fly.
flew every day you could fly?
That's the colonel's orders were, I want a plane in the air at all times.
So you would trade off, or
Yeah,
was that out for defense, or was that to just go out and find other
just
targets?
go out and find targets. And
Artillery's not really worth much if it's not shooting at something.
and if we were on the road, he wanted a plain fine point for the column.
Right.
And there again, you'd have to take turns doing it because you have a limited fuel capacity.
Oh. So having two planes up wasn't always, but you would, I mean, you still have two planes up if you were stationary.
If we were stationary, we could have two planes up, depending on how many targets there were. But I remember one time, my observer said one truck destroyed, one cow killed. And the S-3 came back and said, was cow enemy?
Huh. So there's another question I had was then on 19th. Did you fly on the 19th? You didn't fly on the 18th, but
I'd have to look on my record. Probably did.
Flight log?
Huh?
On your flight log?
Mm.
But there was on the 19th, there was another air observer that called in. They took out the tanks with fire bombers, I guess.
Huh?
With Army, they came in by air and hit Piper's column of tanks on the 19th.
I don't understand what you're talking about.
Well, there was an account of the tank column being taken out by an observer called in the strike and and the Air Corps came in with some 500-pound bombs or something on the planes and hit the column with that.
I don't know.
You don't know? Would you use air?
What?
Would you use air? No, probably not, because you were only firing your own guns for your battalion.
We didn't, but they did use a lot of low-level strafing and stuff, you know. Particularly when P-47 got shot down, and he bailed out, and he stayed with us for a couple of days. The pilot did, and I said, we probably shot him down.
What? Out of defense, possibly.
Could be.
He was strafing the wrong guys. Who knows? Well,
But he was a fellow pilot. So he stayed with the air section for a few days before he could get transportation.
Well, so what in it? You guys have like a house? Did you commandeer a house or something to stay in, or was it stay in tents, or with the airplanes?
Both.
Both. Either way.
We stayed in a house if we could.
Right.
And Vith spoke excellent German, and so he'd usually make the arrangements. I didn't. And I know there we were staying in a house.
And you were in Germany, or?
Yeah, we were in Germany.
You were in Germany at that time. Mm-hmm.
And that's what got me, was that the barn was connected to the house.
What keeps the house warm, right?
That's part of it. And the entrance to the barn was in the kitchen.
Right.
I said, boy, that seems kind of unsanitary. And Biff says, well, would you want to go in from the barn to your living room?
True.
And of course, they saved everything from the cows.
Right.
And in the spring, they go off in what we called honey wagons. And the guy has about a 10-foot pole with a bucket, a little bucket on the end of it. And he'd put it under the spigot and on the back of the wagon.
And chuck it.
Huh?
And chuck it out.
Spread it, yeah, spread it by just chucking it out.
Well, permaculture. They've been doing it a long time like that, right?
Mm-hmm. That's like the first time I picked a field from the air. And I think this was, I don't remember where it was. Probably in Belgium. But it was a road running diagonally through it. I mean, a lane. Well, I'm thinking U.S., you know, you see lane running through a pasture that's just practically level, right?
Mm-hmm.
This sucker was like that deep. They've been running on it for 400 years or so, or maybe 1,000 years.
Right, with wagons.
And so I hit that and took off one gear and the propeller. And
Do you have spare parts for that stuff?
yeah,
So they just fixed it.
yeah. But I learned my lesson on that.
Don't cross a path
Yeah,
in the field.
path going through the field is not like the U.S. You know, you think about our lane out there, the farm that we've been using for 30 years, and it hardly is, it's almost level with the rest.
Yeah, I'd give you a little bump, but not.
Yeah, I'd give you a little bump. That's about it.
Right.
But when they even using the same one for a century or so, it's a little different.
Yeah, I would think so. Well, no, I wanted you to listen to that book that I had gotten, because that sounds to me like it would have been the only potential of that column that you were talking about on the 17th.
Yeah.
Was one that was coming into somebody, and there is definitely roads coming in there that are in a valley type situation.
With forest on both sides.
Mm-hmm. I mean, you look at the maps now, they may be a little different if you look on Google Earth, because it's
Might be.
70 years later.
Yeah.
I'm sure the towns are bigger than they were
Oh, definitely.
back then.
Yeah.
But what was interesting to me was, you know, Vith was relatively not defended.
What's that?
The town of Vith was relatively not defended at that point. And had that column gotten through, it would have been a whole different story going into Bastogne, and because that was the next stop after Vith is Bastogne. And there was really no defense of Vith, and then they brought in that whatever he said was Command B, that they were actually trying to bring their column forward while everybody was evacuating, right?
Well,
And
yeah.
he was kind of pissed that the
it
road
was-
was 2 lanes wide of people retreating when they
I
were
don't
trying
remember the exact date, but the commanding general of 78 called a meeting, and Bennett went
Yeah,
because we were supporting them.
right.
And the general said he started showing the plans for retreating
Mm-hmm.
because of the Bulge. And the colonel got up and said, "Sir, if you come through our area, you'll find 18105 pointed right at you. We are not retreating." And apparently that ended the meeting about retreat.
The plans for retreat,
Yeah.
because 78 didn't have to.
Huh?
I mean, they pulled back.
78?
I think they dropped back. Most
They might have a little bit, but that ended that, I guess.
Well, I know from his account in his book, you know, one of the batteries was actually using their 50 caliber to hold off an infantry attack. So they didn't really have anybody in front of them.
Huh?
one of the batteries was were using their 50 calibers on the M7 on the Priest to hold back an infantry attack, Volksgrenadier attack on their position, which means there was nobody in front of them. They were basically the lead point.
Well,
and they also mentioned at some point in time they were firing 270 degrees, which means you're kind of out there.
yeah. Well, you see, a battery in the armor had 6 guns. I mean, 6 priests.
Right.
And 1 tank.
Yeah.
Plus half tracks and all that. You know, we were pretty, about the only thing that they used trucks for was supply. Except you did have Jeeps and 3/4 tons, and like in our air section we had a half track.
Mm-hmm.
We had a 3/4 ton with a trailer and a Jeep with a trailer to haul stuff, all our equipment and stuff, you know. And both the Jeep and the 3/4 ton had radio units on them.
Right.
And so that we could have contact with the ground as well, with our ground area. Like, for instance, when the observer decided we'd shoot a deer, then we radioed the ground section the location of the deer, and they went and picked it up.
He shot it from the plane?
Yeah.
With what, a M1 or something, or a service revolver?
Carbine.
Huh?
Carbine.
With a carbine.
Yeah. See, our troops didn't have any M1s. They had carbines. That was the issue unit for troops in the artillery. And
It's just lighter.
yeah, and of course ours was the 45 pistol.
Right. Mm-hmm. Well, anyway, I was just curious about that, whether you could confirm that, or, you know, the potential was there that was the column that they mentioned being taken out by artillery with the Cub, and that would you have, you know, been flying in that area?
Well,
but you weren't in charge of the map, so it wasn't your
right.
responsibility.
I didn't know exactly where it was on the ground, but all I had to keep in mind was other aircraft, our own guns, or whoever guns we were firing, where they were located, and in a general area. Other aircraft.
Yep.
And ground fire.
Mm-hmm.
And mostly there wasn't any ground fire because they didn't want to bring artillery down on them. As soon as somebody shoot at you, we'd shoot back.
Well, that's true. That's the way it
With
works.
bigger
right?
guns than what they had.
Exactly.